Right, so you were able to, from the looks of it, just a small few corrections for everybody. We have the, I don't want that color. Might be stuck with that. So we have a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared minus 2bc, and then it is the cosine of angle A.
That's a lot of cosine, right?
That's the law of cosines. The law of sines, you could do the reciprocal of each one of these, but the sine of A over A is equal to the sine of B over B, which is equal to the sine of C over C. So those are the two that you use. When do you use these?
We have one angle and 1 degree.
When you don't have a right triangle.
Oh, yeah, that's scaling.
That's what I was looking for. If you do not have a right triangle, you can't say scalene because scalene could still be a 3, 4, 5. That's a right triangle, but it's still scalene. So you just need to be careful of that part of it. So if we look at this first one right here that's on your worksheet, if we look at it and it says law of cosines is the best choice if, case number 1, the length of all 3 sides of the triangle are known and you are trying to find an angle measure. Those are the examples that we worked through yesterday. So if you know something like this, when you start, one thing I said is you got to have, I don't remember how I stated it, but I stated it to where it confused someone. Confused Eric the way I stated it. What you want to do is you want to look for these pairs. You want to look for the angle opposite of a side. And you want to look at that and say, well, do I have a pair? Do I know a side and the angle opposite of it? Because when you use the law of sines, you have to be able to know one pair in order to cross multiply and divide. And I don't have that here. So that's when the law of cosines is going to come into effect. And when you do that, if you are looking for the angle, whatever that angle is over here, then the side opposite of that is the A in your equation. So it says, do not solve this. But I would like to solve this. If you have enough room and you got your calculator, I would like to show you how to solve this one for case number 1. Yes. No, they are not. Neither will be the one. I mean, the ones that I'm going to draw here in a little bit will not be drawn this scale either. Stating that it bothers you, or is it supposed to be? I just copied it off of here. Yeah, probably not drawing the scale. Oh, come on. So I don't have, like, I circled all 3 colors, the side and the angle opposite, and we didn't have a pair that existed. But I do want to find this pair right here. And that's going to be what starts and what ends the law of cosines. So if we write this, we're going to have 5 squared is equal to 7 squared plus 12 squared minus 2 times 7 times 12. And then we're going to have the cosine of angle x.
Does it matter what numbers you put there?
The 7 and the 12 can switch, but the 5 has to be that A value. Yep. This right here and this right here should be your pair. They have to be your pair. It does. This is not as easy as yesterday. Yesterday, what did you do? You just took the square root because you were finding a side, and it was a lot easier to do. I will agree with that. And that's why I want to point this one out to you, because you're going to have to be finding some parts and writing it down. So if we look at it, if you wanted to, or if you were going to solve this, 5 squared is 25. I would just take my calculator and I can group those two terms together right there. So I would take my calculator and say, what is 7 squared plus 12 squared? Do you get 193? I would just write that down as a separate one instead of saying 49 plus 144. And then we have minus, I can multiply those together right there. So if you take that and you multiply that together, you're going to end up with, I believe, 168. Agree?
Yes, that's right.
The cosine of x. So how do I solve that now? This is not as easy as yesterday. I can type it all in as a value. What do you do now? Yep, we're going to move the 193 over by subtracting it first. We want to isolate this term that involves the variable. So we're going to subtract 193. So take 25 minus the 193 on your calculator, which is going to give you negative 168. That's equal to negative 168, the cosine of x. Now we're going to move the 168 over, but by what operation now? Divide. It's a coefficient to my unknown value. So now, what? Correct. And then I'll show you what to do from there. So we're going to divide by negative 168. So then you get 1 is equal to the cosine of x. Now, we should know that one.
Yeah.
But here's what you do. When you are looking for that angle, how do you type that in on your calculator? That's a number 1 right there. Okay. 1. That's going to bother me. When you are looking for the angle, the last thing you have to do is you have to do that inverse key. And you got to type that in. Which are you in radian mode or degree mode?
Wait, so you go
How to get out of what?
oh, wait.
Yes, you're just talking about your unit circle is what you're talking about.
Do you want to be right?
Type in shift cosine 1.
Oh, there.
You get 0.
Then that doesn't.
That's probably why they're not having you solve this.
So 0 degrees.
I know. You can have 0 degrees in a triangle. I know that. Now keep in mind, once again, this was not drawn to scale. And it does not tell you to solve it. They probably just pick numbers, and that would be something I would do. I don't know. Let's go with a 5, 7, 12 triangle and have you calculate something by just trying to provide an example, and we get 0 degrees. So that, no, you want to be in degrees. But my point was this was not one that they had you solve. My point is trying to make you realize how you solve when you're looking for something else besides this side right here. Because yesterday it seemed pretty simple. Just take the square root of all those values. So the key thing with this was just to get you familiar with the process to solve it. Might be a bonus, I don't know. It's a test. The next one. If I look at this right here, this is case number 2 that's on your sheet on when to use the law of cosines. Once again, do I have a pair of sides? I mean a pair. I don't have 2 pairs, so I cannot use the law of sines. I don't know a full pair. What goes first? Here's your pair right here. So I'm going to let the side be first. That's equal to what? Okay, I started with 13. 13 squared plus 24 squared. You could switch those 2 terms around. minus 2 times 13 times 24. And then we would have the cosine of 87. So your pair has to start and end with that pair. Now this one, we talked about how to calculate yesterday. How do you calculate this one? Yep, you get rid of that square root, or the square by taking the square root, and you can just type that all in on your calculator like that. No, I don't know. We might get some fictitious answer again too.
26.68974266.
13 squared plus 24.
No.
I hope some of you are getting practice on how to type this in on your calculator, because yesterday we found some of you need a close parenthesis. I do get 26.69 when I rounded to decimal places.
Yeah.
For value. But I'm just trying to explain. You had two different scenarios of where to use the law of cosines. One of them you had to find the angle, required a little more work, a few more steps, I should say, a few more steps to get to the solution. And the other one dealt with finding the angle versus the side. What? I would, yes. Right here, here's where you look. That's going to be in degrees. I always keep my calculator in degrees, and then I just let pi be 180. I just know that pi is 180, so I convert it over and I do everything in degrees. Yep. X has a length of, oh, I put degrees. That's my bad. That was my bad. Thanks for correcting me. 26.69. Should be meters or inches or something like that. The next example, they say the law of sines is the best choice if. So if we look at this next scenario, I was circling before, I was circling a side and the angle opposite. Right there, I know that pair. The law of sines is easier to use. It's a lot easier to cross multiply and divide. So there's one set, and here's the other set right there. So if I use the law of sines, I don't care what you put on top. It just has to be the same thing. If you put the side on top or the angles on top, it's 49 over the sine of 115 is equal to the side over the sine of the angle. Now, what if I wanted to solve one like this? You cross multiply and divide, but that's not going to be equal to x. That's going to be equal to sine x. That's what you're going to have to do after you. Yep. Now, here's different ways you can type this in on your calculator. You're going to have to cross multiply. You're going to have to cross multiply and then divide. Okay, I'm doing that blind. There it pops up. All right, so you need to type that in on your calculator. Notice I always put that whole number before I hit the trig function. Because back in my days, the calculators didn't perform orders of operations very well. 16, and then I just hit the sine key. The sine of 115. Close parenthesis. You have to close that parenthesis after 115. And then you hit divide by 49. That is equal to 0.29. Okay, right away I would hope we would think, oh, that doesn't make sense. That's not 0.29 degrees. We realized that the very first example I give you, we get 0 degrees for a triangle. That's not going to work. But this has a value right here of 0.2959. Now what that is that's equal to the sine. So what you have to do is you want the inverse sine of that. Inverse sine of, then you're going to have this 0.2959, whatever that is. Here's a way that you can get it to be as exact as possible. Leave that value on your calculator. Do shift sine So you should have sign to the negative first. And then down here, do you see where the negative key is? It says answer above that. Or actually, you could do this. Arrow up. Well, not everybody can do this. If you have this, you can arrow up and highlight that 0.29 whatever and hit enter, and it's going to put it there for you, so you don't have to retype that whole thing. Arrow up to it. Now hit enter. Oh, did you hit inverse sine first? And then when you hit enter, what is that degree measure for that particular angle? Yep, this should be what is 17.21 degrees. Now here's another thing. Okay, you don't have this fancy calculator, right? I hope you still have that 16, the sine of 115 divided by 49 on your calculator. Do you have that on your calculator, that 0.29 whatever? If you, here's another way you can do it. You go shift sign, and then I want the answer key. Some of you, it might be just directly ANS key. Some of you are going to have to go second function and hit that key, and it means the previous answer. Then hit enter, and you get back to that 17.21 degrees. The other thing you can remember, if you have one of these, just a minute, let me pause this. I'm going to show you one more way, and then I will go around to make sure everybody can get this and you know how to type it in on your calculator. Here's the other thing you can do. As a final step, we're going to have to take the inverse sine. I think some of you are going to be able to type it in this way. The inverse sine of cross multiply and divide. Do you know how to get the fraction key on your calculator? On these?
Alpha.
Yep, alpha y equals, and that's going to get it there. Now, whether you, I don't care, I've shown you 3 different ways to type it in to get that value of 17.21. Find one that works for you, and I'll come around and help you figure out how to type it in on your calculator. Okay, so then, case number 4, I believe. Is that the one we are on? What answer? That 17.21? That's that angle, that top angle measure. Yep. So then here's your last example. And in this last example, we want to use the law of sines. Do I have a pair? Do I know a side and the angle opposite of that? Yeah, you do. You know this right here. If I am looking for x, I have to know the angle opposite of that. It's not given to me, but can I find it? Yes. I'm going to take 180, and what's the sum of those two? 70. And I'm going to subtract that 70, and I know this angle is 110 degrees. So here's what you have. Well, how are you going to set it up? Nope, not which one you write down first, and I don't care if you use the angle first. It's going to be 15 over the sine. From there, you cannot use the law of cosines, because the law of cosines, you have A, B, and C. You have to know 2 of the sides, and you don't. So you would say x squared equals 15 squared plus I don't know squared. So you have your 2 unknown values. So 15 over the sine of 22, because there's a pair, is equal to x over the sine of 110. Now what do? Cross multiply and divide. This one you just type in your calculator, cross multiply, you're going to take 15 times the sine of 110 degrees, and you're going to divide by the sine of 22. Some of you might type that in as a fraction if you were using the TI-84s. Oops, divide by. Somebody correct you. Yeah, I would agree. This has a length of, x has a length of 37.63 degrees. Oh, not degrees again. I did that again. I knew I hit degrees all the time. There you go, right there. $37.63 is what you should get. So we found out how you use sine to find the side. Case number 3, we use sine to find the law of sines, to find an angle measure. Case 2, we use the law of cosines to find the side. And case 1, we use the law of cosines to find an angle. I like just cross multiplying and dividing. When it comes to like case number 1, that's probably the most difficult to solve for, as far as calculations maybe.
So you
Oh, yeah.
use a lot, sometimes you know, 2 ways.
For sides, you would have to know all. No, not necessarily, Eric. We're going to get to some more practice to help you determine what you're going to use. Okay. Questions over that first page. All right. Here's part of your homework. I'm going to help you with the first few. Is what the same thing?
A squared plus B squared equals C squared.
No, it's A squared equals 1 squared plus C squared.
It's still the same variable.
It's
just a variable. It's just a variable, right? The variables can still make sense.
When you write it down in the equation, don't be careful when you write it down. Be careful when you write it down. For an example, the law of cosines. Eric had this. The equal sign goes right there.
Yeah, that's what I said.
So be careful of how you're writing it down. I don't care. As long as you know it. Okay, looking at this example right here. I don't know why. There we go. I want to know, do you use the law of sines or cosines? Now, I'm going to do this a little bit different because my directions are going to change. If you look at this first page, 1 through 6, it just says determine whether the law of sines or the law of cosines is the best choice. And if you read through, it says state whether the law of sines or the law of cosines is the best choice to solve for x for the given figure. Substitute the values into the appropriate formula. Do not solve. I want you to solve, because I think sometimes people can plug it in and then it's like, where do I go from there? So I want you to solve, but once again, since they tell you not to solve, they may not have calculated these in advance and I have not worked through them. And I'm going to have to solve it, but we might get to like that very first case 1 where we get a 0 degrees. Okay? I don't think they will be. But you can always hope. There's nothing wrong with hoping. It's just that it doesn't always come true. All right, right here. What would be the method of choice you would use?
It's law of cosine because you already have 2 sides.
Here's the thing. If you use the law of cosines, you have to, it's,
I meant the law of sine.
okay, if that's what you meant, that's what you want to use. It's the law of sines. The law of sines.
Yeah.
So if I use the law of sines, how am I going to set it up? 12 over the sine of x equals,
No, wouldn't it be 4? Oh, yeah.
equals 25 over the sine. I'm really having a hard time writing today. Okay. I told you, I showed you 3 different ways to type that in on your calculator. How am I going to solve that?
Yes, 0.45.
It does multiply much better.
You should have found out that this has a value of 26.43 degrees. Now remember, this one right here is going to involve this key at some point in time because you're looking for an angle. When you're looking for an angle, you're going to have to use the shift sign. You have to use an additional key to find the angle. Is there questions over this, or were we able to get it?
No, we don't.
Because did you type in 0.45 or did you type in 0.44504.82502? I would use the answer. I would type in the inverse sign of answer key.
Wait, okay. So when I get this big decimal.
I need you to try 2 through 6 and have that by Monday. I can look at them and you need to finish that page for Monday. Attempt. That's what I want. I want you to come up with an answer. I want you to. You may require a little bit of thinking for some of you, but I want you to sit down, spend some time, think about it, and try to answer 2 through 6. Now, I know it says do not calculate, but I'd like you to calculate. I'll have to do it myself because I don't have an answer key for it. So, I copied off an extra, Wilson.